notes scientific principles to address ecological sustainability, quality and health of landscapes, collective memory, heritage and culture, and territorial justice. By leading and coordinating other disciplines, landscape architects deal with the interactions between natural and cultural ecosystems, such as adaptation, mitigation related to climate change, and the stability of ecosystems, socioeconomic improvements, and community health and welfare to create places that anticipate social and economic well-being. Now, this definition is very broad, but it shows that landscape architects have a lot of role to play in social and economic development. I would like to bring us to one of the issues here where the definitions talked about territorial justice. And it occurred to me that a lot of these issues that we have with the Fulani herdsmen grazing along our farmlands is actually under the purview of the landscape architects. When Toby brought this topic to my knowledge, although I had a very little time to prepare, it occurred to me that this territorial justice that the definition of landscape architect was talking about also had to do with mapping of forested areas. You know, if landscape architects before now had a proper, say, map or a drone image of what the forested areas was, a lot of these terrorist issues that we had would have been ameliorated or reduced to a level. Anyway, we'll get back to that in the course of my talk. So territorial, I would like this talk to be interactive. You know, it's not easy talking to the screen and just assume everybody's listening or understanding what you're saying. So territorial justice is one, how landscape architects can help solve the Fulani herdsmen crisis and grazing problems. Okay, so we'll move to my next slide, which is the basis of what this talk is about. What is the relationship between landscape architecture and health? And for a very long time, the landscape architects had no role to play in the United Nations Charter for Health, you know, which is the 6th Millennium Development Goal, the UN set up in 2000. But we've come to understand that beyond medical science, landscape architects have a very critical role to play in, one of which is every medication that we have, you know, by the pharmacologist or the pharmacist actually comes from the landscape. Everything comes from herbs, everything comes from roots, from back of trees, and all of that, okay? Also, the landscape from research has also been very instrumental in healing. You know, anywhere you have nature, you have this, apart from you have aromatic scents from plants, you also have texture, you also have color, you also have hue, and the feel of nature has helped a lot of ailments, particularly cancer in recent times. Now, if we go back to history and landscape and health, we realize that long time ago, when kings, you know, were ill and they had problems with their mental health, many of them had to have landscape, had to have gardens around their castles, around their houses, for the purpose of enjoying, you know, 30 minutes outside, and they come in and they relieve mental stress from walking through the landscape. Now, Salutogenesis is a new paradigm, a new theory that was promulgated in 1979. Before now, medical science, what medical science used to do was pathogenesis. Pathogenesis is what you and I know, which is you fall ill and you go to the hospital to seek medication for malaria, for all of that. The definition of pathogenesis, according to Swansky, says the development of a disease and the chain of events leading to that disease is what pathogenesis is. It occurs as a consequence of complex interactions between an infecting pathogen and immune system. A pathogen is a disease-carrying organism, as we all know from our O-level biology. And the stages of pathogenesis is an exposure to contacts, adhesion, which is colonization, invasion, and infection. I'll give an example of malaria in this. An exposure to malaria means an exposure to mosquito. And the adhesion, the colonization means as soon as the plasmodium enters into your bloodstream, it begins to invade your blood cells, it begins to multiply by meiosis or meiosis or whatever form the virus or bacteria comes in. And eventually it now causes infection. So before now, science was more of curative medicine. You fall ill and how do you get well? That was what it used to be until 1979, when Salisogenesis became a new theory, a new paradigm into wellness. And the person that came up with this theory, Aaron Antovolsky, was a medical sociologist. And he took a case study of Germans, during the Jews, during the Nazi, during the Second World War in 1945. And he found out that there were a lot of people, because that was the bane of infectious diseases in the world, and he found out that there were a lot of people that didn't fall down to any infectious disease, and there must have been a reason, because where there's overcrowding, because they were put in shelters, they were put in tents, like the IDPs that we have currently, but there were a certain set of people that did not fall down into any infectious disease, into influenza or flu. So he decided to run a study. And he found out from his study that a lot of these people, it had to do with mental health and their state of mind, not necessarily pathogens. And so I skipped this part, but let's go back to the definition of Salisogenesis, which salos means health, and the genesis means the origin. So basically, Salisogenesis means the origin of health, as against pathogenesis, which is concerned about curative medicine, curative processes of healing. Salisogenesis is concerned about how to promote health, how to promote mental well-being. So all over the world, there have been radical changes in the environment, demographics, technology, and a lot of things have made the world come back to say, look, instead of curative medicine, which is very expensive, which the third world country is suffering from optimal medical facilities, they have to look into this salutogenic theory, salutogenic approach, to see how well, we can solve this problem. So for now, salutogenesis in the African continent has not been pronounced. If you go through the net and you go through existing literature, mostly it's in the Scandinavian countries, and the United States of recent just started the salutogenesis approach. 2 years ago, I came across this salutogenesis because my interest in landscape architecture has actually been health and therapeutic landscape. Coming from my background as an asthmatic patient, I've always wanted an environment that eases stress, eases respiratory ailments, respiratory diseases, and that is how I stumbled upon salutogenesis. And I haven't been a researcher, but I practice salutogenesis in most of my projects. And the International Academy for Design and Health, 2 years ago, 2019, invited me, the Middle East invited me to deliver a paper on salutogenic approach in my country, Nigeria, African countries. Incidentally, last year I was supposed to be in Norway for the same International Academy for Design and Health presentation, but the COVID came up and we were unable to make that presentation. That presentation is what I have here to share with us today. So salutogenesis is new, yes. 1979 is barely 40 years ago, and we know with research, it takes a lot of time. So we have very few case studies on salutogenesis, okay? So my next slide. Salutogenesis basically is concerned with how people manage stress better, and also about the origin of health, which I have stated. But one of the things we suffer, especially in the third world country, particularly in Nigeria, is mental health, which is an offshoot of Salisogenesis. We have suicide rates at an all-time high. In the last 10 years, we've had suicide rate of an astronomical level. You know, although most of it has not been documented, but we have an average of 300 deaths in a year in the last 10 years. And all of this ascribes to stress, mental tension. You know, we're living in environments that do not have this salutogenic approach to a lot of things. Instead of falling ill, you know, there should be a mental state of awareness, a mental state of wellness, okay? So how can we design these spaces and elements within these spaces to contribute and facilitate to health? Now, I'll give you an example. When the colonialists were around in the 60s and in the 50s, and as late as the 70s, all their environments were green. We could see a lot of mango trees, pawpaw trees. You know, we used to call them the government reserved area. Ikoyi was like that until recently when the government went and started felling trees. But all government reserved areas had this salutogenic approach to design. All the buildings were surrounded with trees, they were surrounded with nature, you know. So that meant the colonialists, they had fresh air, they had access to a lot of things that nature provides, which includes aromatic carbon from plants, includes better scenery, includes a better mental health, you know, situation. What is salutogenic design all about as relates to landscape architecture? Now, like I said, there are few literature now on salutogenic design with landscape architecture. Most of the salutogenic design is built environment based, in the sense that with the advent of COVID, a lot of things had changed. People no longer want to have this communal contact with people, you know, and all of that. COVID isolated that whole communism, which is the other side of what landscape architecture is all about. Basically, landscape architecture is a community-based practice, community-based profession, and originating from parks, which means there was a need to bring people together, you know, void of social class, void of age, you know, together. So salutogenic design in landscape architecture now, the purpose of having this lecture is for we landscape architects to come together and find out how salutogenic design, endemic, like Professor Adejumo has always said, that we should look for solutions that are local based. And this is an opportunity for us to key into Salisogenesis and the approach. You know, it is now time for us to look inwards instead of mirroring what we see overseas. Yes, we can copy, but we can modify to suit our own local demands. I'll give you an example. A lot of cities around the world now have decided to turn a lot of walkways into cycling areas. You know, bike to school, ride your bike to work, ride your bike to your place of worship, you know, and all of that. But you see, will that work in Africa? I would like us to drop some comments, you know, some questions as we go on in the comment section. But in Africa, can that really work for the new modern Africa? In Nigeria, for example, if you go to places like Delta, like Port Harcourt, you know, majorly in the South, you see women riding bicycles, you know, to walk, to farm, to the market, and all that, which is a very normal occurrence in the South. But how do you make that happen or work in the North, in Northern Nigeria? You know, these are some of the things that we have to look into when we think of mirroring other approaches that other countries, you know, have had. For example, with the way our women dress, how do you expect her to climb a bicycle, for example, and walk to her place of work? Is that feasible? Can that be done in Nigeria? No. But walking is something that we can, and we do, and we always have done as Africans for a very, very long time. And that is why a lot of master plans that are cropping up now need landscape architects to come in and say, look, let us stop vehicular movements. Let us reduce it, not stop, but let us reduce it to an extent where we can have walkable cities, walkable environments. I'll give you an example. Our university campuses is full of cars, a lot of vehicles. Every student has a car and the parking lots are full. But imagine that we had one central parking lot from the master plan and there's walkable walkways all through the campus master plan to your department, to your library, to places of worship, to, you just name it. You walk a minimum of 30 minutes, a minimum of 20 minutes in that environment. Why is this a problem? From statistics that I got, we have a high number of young people that are grossly obese. Obesity has become a very big problem in our time, because computers have come in, automation has come in, so sedimentary lifestyle has become one of the things that a lot of us are involved in. And this has caused, when you sit down on a PC for a very long time, you want to snack a bit, unhealthy habits, and obesity has become a problem. It has caused a lot of issues, from cardiac arrest to high blood pressure and all of that. Our environment is no longer moving. The environment is no longer working. And so Salisogenesis have come to say, look, let us rethink this issue of health. Let us begin to look inwardly on how we can have a mental well-being, not to the point of getting ill and going to the hospital to treat yourself. We can actually help ourselves. We can help blood circulation and all of that from the salutogenic approach. And walking is one of the approaches of Salisogenesis as it relates to the African situation, as it relates to the continent. This is a park I designed in Abuja, in the Federal Capital Territory, at Lokogoma. It's called the Stone Base Park. And from this design, you can see that I put the parking lots at the furthest part of the site, so that all of this circular walkway is what makes the site worthwhile. It was my first attempt at Salutogenesis. It was difficult to convince the clients to take this, but eventually she did. And in the city of Abuja, it has become, a site where people come to walk, and enjoy nature and all of that. This is the Nigerian situation. As it stands, in the early 1950s, we were taught in school that the bubonic plague was one of the most hit. It was even, some people, or a school of thought even says it hits the country more than COVID and influenza did. Infectious diseases were so prone in the 50s up till the late 90s. Malaria, tuberculosis, whooping cough, all of those kind of infectious diseases. But what was killing people at that time in mass? But like as I mentioned, obesity has come. It has come to stay, and it's an ailment that has become multidimensional, because it has increased a lot of cardiac arrest issues. You have 26-year-olds, 20 years old, when before now stroke used to be an ailment of the elderly. The young people have started, having stroke, diabetes, pressure, visa disease, and all of that. Anyway, present time now, from coroner's reports, from newspaper reports, from obituaries you see online, you see that the dynamics have changed. What kills people? When before now it used to be malaria, it used to be typhoid, it used to be all of those things, it has changed completely now. Now is environment induced. You hear somebody died of heart disease, look into it chronically, he had a very poor active life, he he didn't assess nature as much as he should. He wasn't exercising. He lived a sedentary lifestyle. Behavioral habits it's beginning to be what is the principal killer of people. Cancer, cancerous growths, respiratory ailments. Respiratory ailments now it's also at its all-time high. Why? Because of combustion of vehicles, because of generating sets, generating fumes, little vegetation cover in the urban areas. You walk through the city and you see a lot of combustion smoke everywhere. But where are the trees? Where are the plants? Who is felling these things? What is the legislation? What are landscape architects doing to preserve these trees? Is our voice being heard? These are some of the questions that we need to pose as regards upper respiratory diseases. And this is why in Lagos, from statistics, the Center for Disease Control, Lagos also has a very high number of people that came down from COVID, the COVID virus, respiratory issues, relationship between respiratory issues and COVID, as we all know, because COVID is a respiratory problem. You can see that Lagos has a high density of vehicles, high density of transportation. And so you have thick smoke, Port Harcourt, the same thing, but there should be an awareness. Let us plant more trees. Let us reduce this carbon footprint that United Nations brought to fore. And let us see how we can ameliorate these issues. Now, in Abuja, where I reside, something remarkable has happened as regards to Salisogenesis. A lot of people have found out that obesity is a killer and sedentary lifestyle is a killer. And we now found out that a lot of abandoned sites, a lot of parks have now become fitness zones. And this brings to mind that this is something that the landscape architects can champion. We can have fitness zones in our neighborhoods. We can have fitness zones, in sites that have been abandoned, formerly designed these spaces for this kind of activities. Not only is Saturday venture, which is the case in Abuja and I'm sure in some parts of the country, but we need to have these spaces for mental well-being. And mind you, these spaces are the only spaces where there is no segregation of people. When you walk into a park, you can't tell this person is a rich or this person is a poor person. You can't tell, there's no segregation. Everybody is mixed. And you see, the more cohesion the community has, the more it helps, this feeling of depression that is running like a wildfire, because some people feel they've been neglected. Some people feel they are not part, they are not part of the social environment. So there's a need for us to look back, look at these empty spaces, look at our parks, and let us begin to find ways to bring people out, to this mental state of wellness. Do not get to a point where you fall ill and you need to be rushed to the hospital, or you need one medication, or you need to fly out. Nature is one way we can have a better health system in Nigeria using this salutogenic approach in design. Have a house, apportion a part of the house, green it. Let the inhabitants of this estate, let the inhabitants of this accommodation, let them begin to enjoy nature. Let us green our cities. Let us have streets that are green. These are some pictures I shot during the presentation I had with the International Academy of Design and Health. And you can see this is a part of Wuse 2 that has trees lined on both avenue planting. If you come to this street 7 a.m. on Saturday, you will think it is a market. It is where a lot of people come to work out, a lot of people come out to exercise because of the shade. This is an estate, an existing estate in Abuja also, close to the PTF estate, green. And you find out, interestingly, that besides the salutogenic approach to design that we're discussing, even cars People park their cars in clusters under trees. Why? These spaces are devoid of vegetation cover. They are devoid of trees. They are devoid of, sorry, just a minute. I'm taking some questions as we speak. Okay, this is the magic land also in Abuja. You know, trees all over the place. You find out that this is where people come in clusters. People leave the city core and come to these places. There is a serious depth of vegetation in our cities, and landscape architects need to look at this again. What do we do? How do we move from here? I also want to say this, that a lot of governments have done a lot of tree campaigns. Katsina has done there, Sokoto has done that, even Lagos has done it. But the issue is, what kind of trees are they planting? In Jigawa, for example, they embarked on a tree planting campaign. And before our president, Architect Batu, made some observations on their tree planting campaign, they were planting masquerade trees, they were planting economic trees at the shelter belt of the borderline, you know, the desert borderline of the Nigerian border. And the question is, what kind of tree are we planting? Are they tree breakers? Are they economic trees? You know, are they trees that help, that have health benefits, or they are trees that just cause problems with their roots to this area? The Great Green Wall Project doesn't have any landscape architects there. You know, we don't have any landscape architect there working. And some of these salutogenic approach principles we are talking about in all of these borderline areas with Niger Republic, with Chad, and all of these things are supposed to be very, very instrumental in those areas. Those people there suffer from what we now know as desert stroke, which wasn't there a long time ago, but now we have desert stroke from urban heat islands, a new theory that has come up from urban heat islands. It's defined as green areas that have been excavated, that has been pulled out, and we now have asphalt, we now have hard surfaces that do not absorb heat or reflect ultraviolet rays back into the sun. So we now have issues of heat stroke around those areas. And this heat stroke is not only limited, or is not only prone to those areas. In the cities of recent, you know, there was this report from the World Health Organization, you know, in African countries, that a lot of people that have fallen down from stroke, from early morning jogging, has been as a result of urban heat islands. Why? You jog, you come out early in the morning to jog, asphalt, bitumen, and all of those things, find it difficult to cool at night. And you now come out in the daytime, you say 7, 8 o'clock, when this heat is at its peak. A lot of people have been hit by heat stroke, slump, cause of death, cardiac arrest, and all of these things. That is why I bring this WUSE2 example to mind. Avenue planting for walkways, avenue planting for jogging. The ozone layer has been depleted, so the volume of heat that is hitting the earth's surface, you can just imagine when you have windows, you know, in a parking lot and there's no tree cover and you open it, you see how much radiation comes out from your car. So imagine how much heat is hitting you directly when you walk, you know, early in the morning, because the ground finds it difficult to cool at night because of exposure to that. Some poor landscape effects on our health is part of what, you know, I was discussing. We need more parks. We need more places. Now that Wi-Fi has become something that everybody must have, you know, we need to get more people outdoors. We need to get more people to interact with nature. Gone are the days where you walk into an estate and everything is just bland. There's, you know, just concrete all over the places. There's a need to have more greens. Do we have a legislature? Not yet. But in our individual projects, I implore us to just, in as much as the client has the final say, to encourage them to say, look, these are some of the issues we're having. Salisogenesis has come to stay. It's a physical, mental state of mind that we need to incorporate into, our existence. I've discussed decreased physical activity. Sedentary lifestyle has caused a lot of this cardiovascular diseases, stroke, diabetes, and a lot of that. Outdoor air quality. Poor vegetation cover has caused a lot of these things. Children, 2 years old, 3-year-old children are having asthma. They're developing asthma. They're developing upper and lower respiratory diseases from exposure to fumes, and all of that. And the climate change, like I explained about the urban heat island that has come to stay. Now, the factors that should determine an optimal salutogenic environment, one of which is education. Now, we are not speaking enough, which is one of the issues that we have. Like salutogenesis shouldn't be a new paradigm, in the sense that a lot of us are beginning to know what salutogenesis is. But this mental state of well-being should be taken into our schools, from primary school. Myself and a few landscape architects, members of SLAN have, taken upon ourselves to go to schools to introduce salutogenesis, introduce landscape architecture, and the need for nature designs in their landscapes. For example, when we're growing up, and those of us that are older, every school had a farm, every school had a garden. Students needed to know how yam grew, how maize grew, but now schools are bereft of all of this kind of nature-based disciplines. Some children have never seen a grasshopper before, some children have never seen a butterfly before. Nature is missing in our schools. All we have is synthetic turf, which is nothing near the real thing. You will not have a grasshopper, you will not have ants, you will not have molehills or termites in, artificial turf, as against having nature. In as much as we want to imbibe this gives you increased longevity. I was reading up the life expectancy of a Nigerian man is now 55 years of age as of 2019, 55 years. And the life expectancy of a Nigerian woman is 62. We need to encourage more movement, encourage more circulation. Eating habits is one of the problems, again, that sedentary lifestyle has caused, and it has increased obesity amongst our generation. Many of us are above the BMI mark of 30, which says that you're grossly obese. Many of us are on that borderline, including myself, speaker. So I discussed the impact of urban heat islands. This is something that we need to let the world know. We need to let Nigeria know. This urban heat island is a very silent killer of a lot of people. People have slumped in their cars. What did the coroner results say? Many of them, we don't have autopsies for that. Many people have slumped jogging. What caused that? Children come back from school with some form of bipolar disorders, seizures, and all of that. The surface, the artificial surfaces, asphalt, concrete have now become a problem, in all of these environments. Heat is not percolating. Heat, ultraviolet rays is going, it's bouncing back into the atmosphere. As simple as this may sound, when you see concrete laid out, in fact, bitumen laid out on a large expanse of land, you see it becomes difficult for visibility, meaning that a lot of people are beginning to have eyesight issues from excessive sun rays from the sun. Like the diagram is showing heat bouncing from building surfaces, anthropogenic heat, heat of vaporization. All of these things have now increased the need for air conditioners and the need for electricity. But have you given it a thought that landscape architects can actually design spaces that we need less power, less electricity, more artificial cooling? Have you given it a thought? Have you actually thought that, okay, in as much as, yes, the government is really not giving us the backing that we desire, but we can have office spaces and have miniature shrubs, that can help cool the environment and a lot of those things. I'm raising all of this for us to think through it. Now, innovations in city greening. A lot of countries have imbibed this. In the African continent, South Africa seems to be leading in this white roofs design. Now, back home here in Nigeria, I'd like to explain this further. In our building designs, we've moved from zinc roofs to aluminum long span, and now we have moved into the metro tile kind of roofing sheets. But what developed countries have done now is, since this roofing sheets actually reflects sun rays back into the sun, they've decided to use white roof so that it absorbs less heat from the atmosphere. So if you look at some satellite imageries of some cities, unfortunately, because of the time I had, I wasn't able to capture it. You see that they now have white roofing sheets as against the red, which is opaque, the brown, which is opaque, which increases the heat in the building and reflects. Now, but you now have a roofing based on color, nothing technical about it, but from our color spectrum, we understand that from white to black has a higher tendency of absorbing heat as against white. New Zealand has a lot of these case studies. You might want to check it out. Then we now have the green roofs, which is new and which Africa is trying to imbibe. I'm working on a project in Uyo presently, and I'm planning to experiment these green roofs. Yes, the technology is not readily available, but it's an experiment that we can try in areas where we have no space on ground to plant trees. We can incorporate the roofs, the green roofs on the ceiling, on the rooftop. Okay, urban farming. This is another concept of salutogenic approach, which is catching up with the world. Where you have road veggies, you have sidewalks, and you have edible plants along the streets, along the cities. But there was a debate some time ago. I listened to some professors debating about this urban farming approach and vertical gardening in the cities, especially in developing countries. Combustion. How do you solve the issue of, you have a vehicle with so much smoke fumes coming from its exhaust pipes, and it's now perching on, say, your mango that you plant along the streets, your fruit along the street, because it's also a problem. Carbon, it's a big problem when it comes to, urban farming. Is Nigeria there yet? Can we have streets that we have regulations, or we have laws against such vehicles? So from my earlier definition of landscape architecture, you can see that landscape architecture is broader than what we think, and what I've discovered from the Nigerian situation is landscape architecture is unique in our own climate. Why? A lot of us have different backgrounds. Town planners are landscape architects, meaning that your core is town planning and you're not a landscape architect. So it's expected that your approach is more regional as compared to an architect that has a micro brief from his study. You have the horticulturists, you have botanists, and all of that. So landscape architecture should be richer in Nigeria than anywhere else for now until the BLA program set up. We're all coming with our own experiences. Even the foresters also are coming with their own understanding of a lot of these things were said. Now, cool pavements is another concept that is fast catching up. Cities are beginning to reduce the use of asphalt on their walkways. They're now beginning to use turf, the kind of turf that you have in stadiums, the Titan tracks and all of that, to reduce the effect of direct sunlight on these surfaces, to reduce this urban heat we're talking about. So a lot of things I said, like you can see, this is a roof garden, not exactly a roof garden, but you can see you planted just to create a microclimate in this space, because there are multi-level buildings, and imagine a 24-story accommodation. I mean, the tallest tree I think is about 20 stories tall. So that means this space isn't supposed to get nature, but look at what they've done with this. Look at what they've done with this space. Look at this. This is a vertical garden. Look at what they've done with this space. I know we're getting there, but I want landscape architects to champion this course. Let us have clients that can pay for such, and let us experiment and learn, which has been the case since I left school. So the roof garden, this is basically the concept. Vegetation is at the top. There's a growing medium, filter membrane, and all of this. I intend to show us this. If you're interested, you can send me your email. I can send you a practical illustration of how this is done and some things that we're doing in real time on our sites in Uyo. This picture is what is showing the Titan material now. It's a synthetic membrane. You see, this car park is devoid of any form of nature. Where you see, landscape architects in America have thought, okay, if we can't plant trees in this area because it probably would distort the existing master plan, they have now devised a means. So you can see asphalt around the parking lots, but all of these things are meant to break the effect of direct sunlight on the surface. These are innovations coming up. Well, this slide was supposed to be for people, visitors to this forum that were not landscape architects. I don't know how many people have joined us now, but the benefits of having a well-designed landscape is something that we should have in our heart anytime we meet a client. We have this improved air quality, which is very, very, very important, because in Nigeria alone, asthmatics have increased, in an astronomical number. I don't have the data, but that is what it is. This improved water quality, underground water recharge, boreholes, landscape architects. The way I see how landscape architecture is going is our scope has really increased. Back to the definition that I gave us, IFLA's definition of landscape architecture I gave us at the beginning of this talk. Improved underground water recharge. A lot of boreholes are being sunk. Water table is being affected. This is also affecting it's affecting the vegetation on our soils. We can take this up as landscape architects. It's not exactly a geological kind of problem or a morphology kind of problem. We also have a say in this borehole. Every building now has a borehole. Every estate has a borehole. What can we do to ameliorate this problem? what is the salutogenic approach to this? If we have more boreholes that are sunk, what is the water quality? What is the water quality that we're actually getting from different levels of the earth strata? Because knowing that most of the water we are getting actually not from the aquifer, but from, 50 meters, 40 meters above the ground. From our definition of landscape architecture, which involves environmental conservation, we should look into this and raise cases, borehole sinking. What is the solution? Reduce noise pollution. Yes, noise levels have increased because of vehicles, automation of generators, and all of that. We don't have buffers anymore. Trees have been cut off. The story of Ikoyi really hurts me. If Ikoyi, I grew up in Lagos, and that area used to be a place where, you see the biggest trees. Some of those trees, historians have said they're about 200 years old, but the environment was serene. You couldn't hear horn blaring from the next district in those areas because of tree buffers. Noise levels have increased. Hearing impairments have also increased. If you take a visit into ear hospitals, you find out that the air impairment issues have increased, coupled with the fact that our generation now begins to use earphones, AirPods, and all of that. Nature is absent in all of these things. Protection of natural wildlife. Well, this is a divergent view in my opinion. But in the cities now, you don't find birds chirping anymore. Some little animals that we used to find growing up are now finding extinction. We can't find them. We're looking for them. We cannot see them. And like I said, Salisogenesis is a mental state of wellness. Sometimes that serene chirping of birds that you hear actually helps the mind. It keeps the mind in tandem. It keeps the pulse rates at an all-time low. So we need to protect this natural wildlife. And it takes me back to what I was saying about the Fulani issue, or the herdsmen, and landscape architects have a very key role to play. There's a part of landscape architecture that talks about wildlife conservation, and we do not have a data yet of how many animals we have in our forests, how many insects we have in our forests. We talk of biomimicry and all of those things, but all of these things, there's a lot of jobs for us to do. It's just to harness all of these ideas. So it brings me to this point. I want us to pause and take a minute to just imagine what Nigeria was like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, as regards nature, and what Nigeria is now. Is it better or it's going worse? Thank you.
Thank you, Amos, for the lecture. We really appreciate the understanding of what Salisogenesis and the connection between landscape architecture and our health. So now I'm going to take some questions and comments. I have some comments in the comment section. So I'm going to take some questions. And then if you have any questions also, you can raise your hand. There's a button at the bottom of the screen for you to raise your hand if you have any questions. So just very quickly, some comments from Grace Akoni. Nobody quarrels with green shaded areas and nature. We all enjoy nature. We enjoy the shade, but we find it hard to plant and cultivate nature. Yeah, that's a big issue with like landscape architecture and just generally cultivating nature. From Dr. Adejimo, good job, Amos. I will exit now. I have another webinar. I hope one day we will have urban policy on Salisogenesis. Many thanks to people that joined in this professional mind renewal. Yes, hoping for urban policy on salutogenesis is a huge task that we do need to take on, and is something that is very important, because once we have policies on incorporating salutogenesis, especially in our health sector, that is going to be a huge win and a huge plus for landscape architects. From Mr. Additional, he has a question, and his question is, how do we reconfigure people's perception towards welcoming the Salisogenesis approach, especially in urban areas where there is limited land area? Can continued education, mass media, and advocacies do? So that's a question for you, Amos. So let me just run through everything, and then you would answer any other questions that are in the comment section. Good job to the presenter. This is a very thought-provoking issue in the urban landscape. Yes, and then from Victor Ayelabola, when you were talking about the green roof, he mentioned that there is a project currently running on green roof, which is the J.K. Randall Center in Unicon. Victor Ayelabola, if maybe towards the end, if you want to just give us a brief, if you know anything about the project and you want to give us a brief note on that. So finally, yes, from Grace Akoni again, unfortunately, Nigeria is not getting better. It's worse in every aspect in the last 10 years, which is why, again, this call to action for us as landscape architects is to continue doing our work as landscape architects, and hoping that the work we do, every small step we take, will be a step in the right direction. Okay, Amos, very quickly, if you want to answer the question from Mr. Additional, asking how do we reconfigure people's perception towards welcoming the Salisogenesis approach, especially in urban areas where there is limited land area? Can continued education, mass media, and advocacies do?
Okay, well, unfortunately, advocacy is the only thing that we have here in Africa. That's the only thing. Advocacy and education. We need to speak more. We need to have, to have a bigger voice. And I always use the Bring Back Our Girls campaign. Bring Back Our Girls campaign started with one person, 3 people, and they came together in a landscape environment, the Unity Fountain, which was designed by our own architect Mimuna, to make that kind of noise, and people now identified with that. That is where I see this advocacy going into. We need to come together, increase the noise, and more education. There's no other way we can make that kind of impact other than that question. More people, more noise. That's my take.
Hello.
Hello, good afternoon, Dr. Batu.
Yes, my dear PRO, thank you, and thank you to everybody that has been in this exercise. I'm sorry I came in real late, but it's interesting. Now, I want to I think it is just more than advocacy. The salutogenesis should be considered from the onset of your scheme. We are thinking of how to solve COVID-19 issues. This is part of it. And he was mentioning other aspects of landscape architecture. I think if we begin to think of landscape architecture as being human-based, and that is all the human senses are captured. This concept will be taken care of effectively. So everybody should, from the onset of your conception of design, carry in mind that every design, whether a micro scale or bigger scale, have the human being in mind. And so, in fact, all the designs should be involved. And that means even if you are doing therapeutic design for hospitals, it is mostly captured in there. And if you're thinking of horticultural therapy, again, it captures that very well. Then what is botany when I was running a program in horticulture and landscape technology at the Polytechnic, and it became very successful. Ethnobotany in landscape architecture handles this concept of salutogenesis very well. I also want us to know that there's an introduction in park design, which they call exoscape, E-X-E-R-S-C-A-P-E. Exoscape brings in people in the park, not just to be docile, to sit down, or to be romantic, but it keeps, you have your interest in the area of exercise, so that you go home feeling better than the way you. A lot of things that are involved in this. I am interested in this particular topic, and I think we can, if you don't mind, bring it up again so that people can now come in with different designs. And I know personally I have projects that have handled this type of thing before. So we found a way of reintroducing this topic. Let everybody, let people join, and we see the need for understanding landscape architecture beyond the idea of beautification. I think I will I will stop here so far for now.
Thank you, Architect Batu, for your comments, and we appreciate it. Okay, so finally from Victor Elabola, he's running late for another meeting. He talked about the J.K. Randall Center that is working on the green roof. So his comment is this: Arabella, in collaboration with other stakeholders, have endeavored to influence the development of urban spaces that have ice cores in low carbon emission. J.K. Randall is one of the few, but is a good showcase of what they have embarked on. That is a very, very important one. And I think that, again, for us as landscape architects, it's very important for us to embark on this sort of projects that are not just aesthetically pleasing, but also very, very helpful to the environment. If you have any other questions or comments, you can raise your hand or you can unmute your mic and speak quickly. If not, I would want Amos to give a closing remark, and then we can end the lecture series for today. Thank you.
Okay. I want to thank us all for making this lecture worth our while, and I hope we learned a thing or two from our discussions today. But the discussion doesn't end here. I mean, we can take it up from here. Private DMs. I have some private DM messages, WhatsApp, and let's discuss Salutogenic. Let's discuss landscape. Let's make all the buzz that we can. Thank you all. Thank you, our president, for honoring this meet. Thank you, Toby. You've been very energetic. Thank you for encouraging me to speak out. In as much as I was nervous at the start of the talk, I say a big thank you. Enjoy your lunch break. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you everybody for coming, and we would make announcements of any next lecture series coming up very soon. Have a wonderful day. Bye, guys.
Thank you very much.